All right, hello everybody. So that was rough, actually. So, um, you know what? We just got back last night. For those of you who don't know, we were on vacation, and we don't normally do vacation. Not, you know. Um, let me see here. All right. Um, so I think that the holidays that we keep adding on to the traditional holidays, I think, are kind of ridiculous. You know, so we haven't really done all of that pretty much for my whole career. So when we do go on holiday, it's normally to see family and stuff like that. Anyway, um, so I don't have any real news this week. Normally we're going to start off with news, but since I wasn't working, what we're going to do is go straight to the questions. And the top question comes up here is, what scales should I use for jazz? That's a really open-ended question, right? What scales should you use for jazz? Um, the answer. Okay, so if I've seemed kind of groggy, we got in late last night, and yeah, I'm still a little um, having trouble thinking straight. Anyway, what scales do we use for jazz? The answer is all of them. But you know what? When you say what scales do we use for jazz, usually that conjures up what that means to people. What they're talking about when they say that is, what scale do I use for material? And that's not so cool. So the way I have the jazz studies set up, right? We have technique, we have listening. Listening is first. Listening, technique, language, tunes, and then the actual improv. We cover 5 different areas. The scales fall under the technique category. So asking me what scales should I use in jazz is sort of like saying to a football player, what rudiments should I, what rudimentary exercises should I do on the football field? Okay? That's like, if someone were to ask a professional football player, do you do push ups on the field? Of course, the answer is an absolute no. You don't do push ups on the field. You don't do pull ups on the field. Okay? You don't. Um, does that make sense? So, uh, when we do the scales, it's for technique. That's not material we're supposed to be playing in our solos. Sometimes it comes out like that, but that's not. To me, what it comes down to is, where is your brain, right? What are you concentrating on? And so the whole point of practicing the scales is so that you're not going to have to concentrate on that stuff. So when we improvise, we're not thinking about scales. Now, there's a difference. So scales and keys they're related, right? The scale is the skeleton of the key. So you can improvise in the key. That is a legitimate thought. Okay. It's sort of like saying, oh, I'm having a conversation. What language am I in right now? Right? What language am I speaking right now? So in that regard, yes, we want to be able to have um, when we're actually improvising, thinking about that key, the key that you're playing in. Okay. Um, but no, if what you're doing, if what you're concentrating on while you're improvising is scales, then you're not playing music. So let me show you this. So, and you know what? A good example of that, every year, these etudes come out, right? And this is the reason why I started writing the jazz etudes every year. Okay? Because you could look and you could see that they were writing the etudes the same way that the pedagogy was teaching people how to improvise. So if I write a jazz etude over the blues, they might go, right? And you know what? Even for that matter, what I just did when I went from the B flat to the A, we call that voice leading, right? A lot of those guys that do that stuff don't do the voice leading, right? Um, but even if they did the voice leading, even if they found some textbook someplace that talked about the voice leading, if the material that you're playing, right, this is hard for me to do, right? Right? That sounds awful. But that's if and so I'm trying to play scales when I do that. That's now let's be honest here. There are some people that can play scales, think scales when they're improvising and do a lot better than that. The reason I can't is because I don't want to. I think it sounds horrible. Even at the highest stages, it sounds horrible. Okay? Even at the highest levels, it sounds horrible. Maybe not as horrible as what I just did, but it's at every stage, it sounds horrible. I'm going to give you now just a couple measures of something that's more motivic. Okay? That wasn't scales. I wasn't playing scales. I wasn't thinking scales. Okay? I wasn't thinking chords. Still wasn't my best work, but you get the idea. When you're playing scales, it just sounds like notes. So when someone asks me, this is the question. When someone asks me, what scales should I use for jazz? The answer is practice all of the scales. Start with the basics, right? Start with the major scales. If you don't know all 12 of the major scales, it's time to get on that. After the major scales, I typically give my students, how do I want to say that? I don't give them a choice. The direction that their music is heading helps me decide which scale is next, right? So if they're leaning in a more of a jazz direction, we will probably do the pentatonic scale next. So after they learn all 12 major scales, we start working on the pentatonic scales. If they're not jazz players, then we'll go to the harmonic minor. And this process never ends. The process of learning skills never stops. This is for the rest of your life. But the point I wanted to make now, and there are some there are some skills that we use, that we practice for jazz, that we wouldn't normally practice for other music, right? Like what would I say? Well, like the augmented scale. That's a scale that would typically not be practiced by a classical player. Same thing with the tritone scale. That's a scale that normally we would not. Um, Now both of those are very advanced. I would not recommend working on those if you haven't done the more standard, more traditional skills. Okay, but those are skills that we would normally practice if you're a jazz player, a more advanced jazz player. Okay, but here's the thing: you don't use those skills in your solo, and that's the point I'm trying to make right now. Okay, you don't use those skills in your solo. Sometimes, on a rare occasion, like I just showed you the tritone scale, right? Sometimes on a rare occasion, I might do as a transitional material, I might do something like that. And technically, you could break that down and say, well, that was a scale that you just played, and so we don't want to. I have to be real careful the way I'm saying that. We don't want to say, thou shalt never play a scale in your solo. I'm not saying that either. It comes out. If you've been practicing your scales correctly, the scales do come out in your solos as scales. What I'm trying to get, and this is why I'm spending so much time on it, what I'm trying to get everyone to understand is what's different is what are you trying to do when you improvise. If you improvise the way that traditional jazz pedagogy tries to get you to improvise, what they want you to do is say, oh, this chord here, I'm going to play this scale. That chord there, I'm going to play that scale. This chord here, I'm going to play that scale. Okay? That does not produce good results. I think sometimes practicing that way is a good exercise. Sometimes I have better exercises that I teach my students. But no, that's not something that we want to be thinking about when we play it. Okay? So the answer, bottom line, the answer to the question, what scale should I use for jazz? The answer is every single one of them. Just don't be trying to play scales while you improvise, okay? That's not, I know a lot of people teach that. That's not what you want, okay? Anyway, other questions that have come up this week, let me see. And feel free to add other questions as we go here. Thank you guys for coming out and joining me this way. I'm looking at my, it's interesting. I got, in the space of a week, I got 3 different people asking about the Daily Routines book. And I went and I looked, and sure enough, so they thought that there was some kind of error in the way it was printed. But no, it was an error on my part. I don't know how this happened. I looked at the table of contents. I have, where did I put it? My mom gave me back copies of my original copies of my book back when I was doing them by hand. Let me go get you that. Oh, here they are. So like this book, this is my 20 studies book. And what's interesting about that, so the text on the cover, I did that with a typewriter. I didn't have the money, didn't have the money back then for a computer yet. So I took a typewriter and I typed the text I wanted. I took it to Office Depot, put it on the copier, and expanded it probably 150%. And so the original font for that was this size. See up there? And then I just went to Office Depot and this is back, let me see what 1993. This is the same year that I got my first computer. So this would have been before that. And you know what? The reason why I got my computer, because I couldn't afford that computer. That's the when you look at the history, I won't go into that, but I shouldn't have even gotten that computer. So here's a copy of Daily Routines, the original version. Now this one I didn't use the typewriter for the top for the cover page. This is all my handwritten stuff, freehand with a ruler. And I think what happened, now that I'm looking at this, I didn't look at this when my mom gave this to me because I wasn't thinking about that. I think what happened was that the introduction on page 2, I think I just took this and put it straight in the other book without actually looking. So yeah, look at that. There's the introduction. And there's the table of contents. Yeah, this is the first version of the Daily Routines book. What's the copyright date on this? Let's look at the copyright date. 1991 for this book. All right. And I'm looking at it. So I haven't seen one of these in years. This is all my, I did all this by hand. This is 100% by hand. Even the page numbers, look at that, the page numbers. I used to have a, because I've been writing music since 1970s, right? 1975-ish, somewhere around there. And so over the course of time, I learned how to use the fountain pen for writing sheet music. And that's what this is. This is, in fact, we can say that this was the best work that I've ever done as a copyist, freehand, right? So just giving you an idea of what my freehand used to look like. Okay, this is my old freehand from the Daily Routines book. Okay, so anyway, what I'm talking about is we had 3 people asking about that introduction. And here's the weird thing is the version of the book that they're reading is like over 20 years old. All these years, nobody ever brought that to my attention. Now, I'm not blaming anybody else but myself. The fact that that introduction is missing was something I should have caught. But yes, there's a lot of people asking about the introduction at the beginning. And so what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to go back and fix this. But I can't do it overnight because it's something that, because it's distributed at Amazon and all that stuff. What I might have to do is I might have to do like a third edition. I consider this the first edition. This is a first edition. That computer version is a second edition. And this book, and I want to show you the introduction is really, in fact, I wouldn't normally do this, but since so many people have been asking, I'm going to read to you the original introduction that's mentioned in the table of contents. I know it's kind of rude to read like this, but let's do this. The physical trumpet pyramid is an outline of the physical demands of trumpet playing. In contrast to ladder type of outline, a pyramid shows dependency. As a person climbs a ladder, each new rung supports the weight of that person. The bottom rungs are left behind. In a pyramid type of outline, all new material relies on the previous used material. In application to the physical demands of trumpet playing, a pyramid type of outline implies a specific order of dependency. The details of this type of dependency are discussed in the Physical Trumpet Pyramid by the same author. That's back in the days when I thought books had to sound like they were written by somebody important, right? So the tone of the books back then was that fake trumpet author tone. Anyway, this is the Physical Trumpet Pyramid that it's talking about. This exact book is actually not available anymore because I didn't like it at all. So the new version of the Physical Trumpet Pyramid book is actually better. All right. Second paragraph. Daily routines is a collection of 7 separate routines, each containing material from the top 4 levels of the Physical Trumpet Pyramid, plus a set of tonalization studies. So notice that, right? I say here, plus a set of tonalization studies. The tonalization studies have nothing to do with the pyramid at that time. It took me years to figure out that the tonalization studies could be between the long tones and the lip slurs and actually be part of the pyramid, right? I just didn't have that yet. This stuff is all, this is done. My concepts are living concepts. They are not from a book. They are not etched in stone. This is stuff I'm still, you could almost say, discovering today. Discovering isn't actually the right word. I'm still working these things out, right? It makes sense that over a period of, I think it was about 10 years after I wrote the original version of this book, 10 years later, I decided that the tonalization study should be between the long tones and the lip slurs. And now I can't even imagine doing so. In the daily routines book, they're at the end of the routine because at the time I thought, hey, these are important, but they're not part of the routine. And that's what I'm saying here in the introduction. I'm saying that each let me go back. Each containing material from the top 4 levels of the physical trumpet pyramid, plus a set of tonalization studies, as if that was something extra. The bottom level or foundation of the pyramid is only left out because it lacks pitches that can be written in musical notation. In other words, do your air exercises, okay? But we don't have a musical notation air exercise thing that we put down. And actually today, I think I could pull that off. But back in these days, I was like, don't know what to do. Not in the book. But you should always precede every routine with some air exercises. Okay, after that, please be aware of the importance of doing air exercises. They should precede the material in this book. That's what I just said. Okay, last paragraph of the introduction. Where the materials in the physical trumpet pyramid are meant as examples and not to be used as a true routine, daily routines is the opposite. The daily routines in theories, in daily routines, the theories are not as important as the actual material. This book is to be practiced, not understood. It's not a pedagogy book. You don't have to understand any of it for it to work for you. For best results, students should play one group each day that they practice. In those days, I called these groups. So each routine was called a group. That came from the Irons book, I think. Doesn't Irons, Earl D. Irons, I think was the guy's name. He had a book that has groups of exercises. So that's where the word groups comes from here. So yeah, you do the exercises, they work. That's how it works. You don't have to understand anything. Whereas with the physical trumpet pyramid, the whole point was for you to understand how the pyramid works. Okay, moving on. This book is to be practiced, not understood. For best results, students should play one group each day that they practice. Okay, don't play more than one. And the reason why I had to write that, even back then, is people thought that you start at the beginning of the book and you go as far as you can. No, you do one routine each day. One suggestion is to alternate days of difficulty. On Monday, do group 5, then on Tuesday, do group 2. That kind of alternation will create strength. So I've got that down to a whole science now, this alternating. So I think, let me look at the other book. All right. So yes, I'm looking at the one that's available now. And that content I just read to you has been completely left out. There is a new section in the computer version that, okay, so this is also material that's not in the new book. Okay. I say new, I mean new as in like 93, 94. Okay. So I guess what I'm going to have to do, I guess remembering back to when all this stuff, you have to remember that I'm the way the publishing works for me, it has nothing to do with me. Okay? This is how the publishing works. It's not about me. It's not about me sitting back here saying, oh, I'm so smart and I'm so good at the trumpet. I should share that with people. Right? No. Where the book comes from is more like, oh man, I had a really rough time with this, trying to get from here to there. And I kind of found a way to get from here to there. And I wrote it down. And I shared it with my students and helped them get from here to there. And so these books are not born out of greatness. These books are born out of hardship, right? And struggle and difficulty. All right. And here's the thing. So, and the reason I'm telling you that is because I think when I switched over to the computer version of the book, I was a little upset because nobody was reading this material at the beginning. Nobody. Okay. So I made a conscious. I remember this. Made a conscious decision to leave all this text out and just put one page, what I call technical notes. Okay. I put one page of technical notes in here. And left all this other stuff out because nobody was reading it anyway. Oh, and part of the reason for that was I was trying at the time to bring the price of the book down. The book in those days was $35, and I was losing money, right? Because I don't mind sharing this stuff with you. This book here cost me $35 to make. Doesn't look like that, right? Because today we have print on demand, right? You just send them a file, and then it's like, you get the same kind of deals that the publishers get today. But when I put this book together, this comb, I had to buy a machine to put the comb in there. Okay, and then I had to buy a box of combs, and they weren't cheap. And my covers are index stock. Now, there was a short period of time when I wasn't doing index stock. I was doing actually construction paper. Some of those books are, I doubt many of them have survived. So yeah, buying the paper, doing the copy. So how many pages is here? Okay. It's like over 90 pages, 92 pages, right? And I did this on a Xerox machine at the Office Store, Office Depot. And so the price of the book, I wasn't making but maybe $1 or $2 off of each book. And then, okay, so that's how much of a margin I gave myself. I'll make $1 or $2. But then I didn't account for other problems along the way. So when I say I was losing money on the books, it's because I didn't give myself enough of a profit margin so that when stuff went wrong, the margin didn't, so all of the profit went to the problem. And it ended up back in those days, I'm talking about the 90s, in those days, it cost me money to have the books available. Okay? So part of the reason I took the text out was to keep the price down. Okay? It wasn't until, when did print on demand start? I want to say 2005-ish. So we've only had really print on demand for about 15 years now. So if it wasn't for print on demand, I think right now the books would be lost. Well, I shouldn't say that. You know what? Because with my beliefs, what I believe is that these things happen when they happen, the way they happen, that success is not dictated. You know, I guess what I'm saying, as a Christian, I believe that these things opened up when and how they opened up for a reason. And if it hadn't been print on demand, it would have been something else. I truly believe that. Okay. Um, so I shouldn't say if it hadn't been for this or hadn't been for, I shouldn't say that. That's not right. Okay. But yeah, it was nice getting these books back from my mom. I gave them to her, and she just had them on a shelf somewhere. So I said, "You mind if I take those?" Um, oh, look at that! One of my very first ad for my brass quartet. That's cool, huh? I remember. Uh, so it's Louis Waters holding trombone, right? Louis isn't a trombone player; he's a trumpet player. He was in the studio. At this point, I don't even remember why he was in the studio, but yeah. Oh, you know what? I think I just asked him to do the photo, and he just held the. You know that this little brochure here got me a lot of work. Um, yeah, it was just nice to get these back and look at them and see how far the books have come, really. And now, you know, um, we've got dozens of books now, dozens of them. Not all of them are print. A bunch of them are just. See, I guess it depends on how you define what is a book, right? Is an ebook a book? So, for example, I've got this book called Trumpet Switchbacks, but it's not available in print, right? So, do you consider that a book? It's got, I think, close to 100 pages, maybe. I don't remember exactly, but it's a full size book. It's not. Some people will call it an ebook, even though it's only got like one chapter in it. So I guess that's what I'm saying. It comes down to what do you call a book? If you consider it an ebook that only has like 20 pages in it, a book, I haven't written dozens of books. I've written hundreds of them, over 100 books for sure. If that's how you define a book, I've written over 100 of them. Okay. Um, to me, I can't do that. I call those modules, those ones that are just like 12 pages, 20 pages. I call those modules. And a module, the whole point of calling it a module is that you can take this, this, and this and put it together and make your own book. And so, for example, the tonalization studies. So that's another thing. We have so many tonalization study books, right? I only recently decided that the difference between a module with the tonalization studies and a book is the tonalization studies that have all the keys is going to be a book, and tonalization study that's just one key is a module. Of course, we haven't implemented that yet, but that's the language. We've defined the language that way. So that way you don't have to buy the whole thing. Now, it does cost more, right? So instead of spending, what is it, $15, I think, on the tonalization book, you can get for $3.99 just one key. Now, why $3.99? Well, I was wondering about that, right? A lot of these places are the minimum that they're charging is $3.99, and I didn't understand that. Why would they do nothing lower than $3.99? So, like, if you have one sheet, let's say you have a piece that's just one sheet of music, they're charging $3.99. Why is that? Well, Pearl and I sat down and looked, and it has to do with. Remember, I told you about my book where I didn't put the profit margin high enough so that the book was actually costing me money when stuff went wrong. right? Like, for example, um, well, I'm not going to go into what technically went wrong back in those days, but yes, Pearl and I sat down and we figured out some of the stuff that could go, quote unquote, go wrong with the ebooks. You would think not, right? But yes, that's the digital stuff. There's problems. Like, for example, when the company that's selling it wants to have a sale, well, now you're in trouble, right? Now you're in trouble because you were charging the bottom line anyway already. Now they're going to add a sale, and so there you end up paying more in fees than what you're getting in profit. So that's one of the reasons. I figured it out. I did the math, and $3.99 is the lowest that I can charge for anything. So and I don't think it's a coincidence that's the same price that everybody else is charging as their lowest. Okay, I don't think that's a coincidence. The $3.99 thing is what it is because of the cost of doing business. Um, so uh, even if it's so you'll see almost a whole now. Okay, so some of the older stuff I haven't changed the prices yet. So if you go back now, you might see something that I've posted at $1.99. But that's how we figured this out. We sell something for $1.99, and then this fee gets taken out, that fee gets taken out, and the people who sold it had a sale. There's no money left after that. So I know that sounds weird to be talking about that on a trumpet forum. I'm just trying to explain to you how this works, right? You know, each see digital is different from the old world, right? Digital is different. The work that you have to go through to get that product there has nothing to do with how long the pages, how many pages the file has. Okay, doesn't work like that. So I mentioned in a previous video how many hours it takes for me. So one of the things I've been publishing right now are these trumpet hymn duets, and this is not to be confused with the unadorned trumpet hymns. The unadorned trumpet hymns are, even though they're duets, there's no compositional stuff to it. I just created a second part, and sometimes people like that more. And we will eventually have a book of those second parts. Well, both parts, but that's the whole point of those hymns is that they're unadorned. There's nothing extra in them. I'm not even putting the amen at the end, right? These trumpet hymns that I'm doing, the duets, are more compositional. They've got introductions. There's counterpoint between the two parts and stuff like that. Okay, so but we're talking about just 3 pages of music, most of them, and it's taking me the same amount of effort and time and investment and money to publish one duet as it would to. So what's the biggest piece that I've published so far? Probably the Hopewell Suite. I think that's my biggest composition at this point. When I printed it out, it's like this thick, this fat. That's 6 trumpets, 7 different movements. It's a trumpet ensemble, 7 movements. I think the piece is over 30 minutes long or something like that. So this much paper, if you stack it up, it's about that tall. As far as getting the thing online, ready to go, the same amount of time for both of them. And see, if you invest that much time, you need to get, how am I saying this? So The Hopewell suite, not worth talking about that, right? Because once that thing sells, I think we're charging $70 for it, $75 for the Hopewell suite. And we are gonna one of the objectives we have, hopefully in the near future, is to break that up into individual movements and just sell the movements. But for now, someone pays $75, and even if they had a sale and they got it down to 65, we're not worried about going in the black. I mean, in the red. I'm sorry, the red. We're not worried about making a loss on that piece. With the duets, and this is part of how we figured it out, right? I was selling some of this stuff for $1.99. We're actually going in the red. We're actually making a loss by selling that piece for that price. I don't know what got me talking about this. So anyway, I hope that makes sense. Oh, that's why we were talking about this, because of the books. You know, the whole publishing thing is so very, very different from when I first started. You know, when I first started publishing, for me to do it right with, send it off and get it professionally printed and all of that stuff, you had to buy at least 1,000 copies of your book. That was the lowest number you could buy. And at that time, the money it would have taken to get that, it was not possible for me. So this thing and you know what? And this is probably the most boring Q&A we've had so far. If you've lasted this long, let me share this with you. If you could take one nugget of wisdom from this video, I would say, looking back at my career, right, I would say I would stress how important it is to work with what you've got. Don't ever use as an excuse. If I had some of the excuses that I've heard some of my students or some people out in the internet or whatever, people say, I don't have this and I don't have that. I don't have this, I don't have that. You take what you've got. And you know what? Now that I'm actually talking about it, this is biblical. What I'm talking about. So, talking about this book, I sent this book off to a publisher to try to get it published back before it was computer, right? In fact, this is one of the reasons why I got a computer in the first place. I sent this off to a publisher. They said, thank you for your manuscript. And I'm like, manuscript? Manuscript? That's no manuscript. That's a final product, right? That's the book. Manuscript. I know what they meant, but you know, what I'm trying to tell you is that I didn't use any limitations as an excuse for not moving forward. I had plenty of excuses. There were plenty of legitimate reasons for me not to move forward. And this is not just the publishing. I'm just using the publishing as one example. If I hadn't moved forward with what I had when I did, the copyright date on this is 91. I think I wrote it in 89 or 90. The reason I put the copyright date in there as 91 is because I sent a copy to, if I'm not mistaken, to the Library of Congress, just to protect it. So that's why the 91 is in there, if I'm not mistaken. But if I hadn't done that, so here's the thing, is if I hadn't done it then, would I not have used the same excuses later? Think about that. Would I not have used? I think I probably would. If you're the kind of person who's not going to go forward because of this, if you're the kind of person that won't go forward because you don't have all the stuff you need to go forward, at one stage in your life, what makes you think you're going to be the kind of person that, well, later you will go forward? It doesn't happen like that. You go with what you've got. And if you've got almost nothing, then you take that tiny bit that you have. And why did I say this is biblical? I said it's biblical because of the fish and the loaves, right? There weren't enough fish and bread to feed the multitudes. But Jesus took that, thank God for it, fed the multitudes, everyone got what they needed. And there was extras left over. That's the story of this book. This book was for most people, it was, it was probably a joke. I had friends that were publishing at the time, and theirs was published, like really published. Hal Leonard and stuff like that. My book back then, the same book that people are still buying today, my book was a joke. It's the same joke as trying to feed thousands of people with just 6 loaves of bread and 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Right? It's the same joke. You got to be joking, right? No. So you move forward with what you've got. I didn't even have stencil for the cover. Okay? So, you look at my career and you see where I am today. And you can say, oh, some people just have everything given to them. What? In a way, it's true, but not in the way you mean. Okay? The process of getting these books out. And like I said, now we've got dozens of books. And it's because there were no excuses. There were no excuses. You don't say, well, I don't have this and I don't have that. Well, you make it work. You do what you have to do with what you've got. My whole career is like that. I'm in a great place career-wise. I'm in a great place. And it's moving in the right direction, and everything is, there's like people use that word synergy, right? There's like a synergy to it. There's an energy. And it's got energy, it's got direction. It's very exciting. But if you look You know, it's sort of like a boat, right? The boat's on the water heading in that direction, and the faster you go, the bigger the wake is behind you, right? When I look back at my career, it all it's all one mess after another, one disappointment after another. Never did I use any of those disappointments as an excuse to quit. Did I ever want to quit? Oh, yeah. Many, many, many times in my career did I want to quit. Many times. Um, you know, but that's not, I used to think of myself as a quitter because I never finished my university stuff. But that's not really how it works. In fact, the fact that I didn't finish my degree but still accomplished what I've accomplished means that I'm far, far, far from a quitter. That not getting my degree was one of the excuses I could have used to not do what I've done. Okay, so that's what I want to leave you guys with today. We only talked about two topics, and I got way, way, way off course. Um, and we got kind of off to a slow start. You know what? I do have a little bit of time left. Let me tell you what I do with vacation, because I did sound horrible on that when I picked my horn up. It's the first I played since when's the last a Sunday. So almost a whole week of not playing. And I think I told you last time I don't practice on vacation. So when I played earlier, there were like some of the notes didn't come out. And normally, and maybe next time what we can do is do a warm up. Normally I would have warmed up today because I actually I got up and got the room fixed up, and then I went back to bed and woke up right before this video started. And um, so normally what I would normally do is um, go through the pyramid, but very quickly. So you just hit each one of those exercises in that order, right? You do an air exercise. In fact, you know what? Let's go ahead and do this now. Follow along with me if you want. So always start with the air exercise, and I'm going back now to doing the fist. I was doing the backwards mouthpiece for a while, and I did the fist in the last video that I did about this. And I'm like, I'm going back to the fist. The fist is so much better. Okay. Notice I only did two. If I'm just doing a warm up, I don't need to do all three. Okay, normally I do three exhales like that. Then I'm going to do a uh, lip buzz. Okay, and notice that I'm doing slow stuff. There's a psychological element to this, right? If you have to do a quick warm up, a lot of times what we do is try to play things fast, and I try to actually do the opposite. Anthony says he's at HEB trying to get back to his horn with his. That's funny. Actually, Anthony, I didn't know you lived in Houston, so that's very interesting. Um, Jones Road. Why does that ring a bell? Anyway, enjoy HEB. I like HEB. Um, so after, oh, what I was saying is that we want to do slow exercises in a fast warm up because it gets your head in a better place. The warm up is more mental than it is physical, right? So I just did the lip buzz. Now I'm gonna do a mouthpiece placement. All right, so then we do, once again, mouthpiece buzz, but we're going to do very slow. Notice that I'm not playing very loud. A lot of people, they pick up the mouthpiece. And I'm not against this. I'm not saying, I mean, it's different personalities, really, what it comes down to. But they'll go, and I'm like, oh. I guess some people teach that, but that's not what I do. Okay, so then after the mouthpiece, I'll just improvise some slow notes, right? Like one phrase, one long phrase, and then I will do some scale stuff. It almost doesn't sound much different from what I just did, except that what I did now was officially long tones. Now we're going to do some scale stuff. And that's it. Just one breath. Okay? And a lot of times, that's as far as I have to take it. If I have something that has articulation in it, let's say it's a classical gig, I might now add articulation to what I just did. Now, some people will say, well, what you need to do is at least play as high as what you would play in your performance if you're going to do a quick warm up. I don't approve of that personally. I think what they're thinking is that it's sort of like lifting weights. So you have to lift that much weight so that you can lift that much weight later or something along those lines. But playing high isn't hard. And I think when you have, there's power in the way that you think, right? There's power in the way you think. And if you keep saying that it's hard to play high, it's going to be hard to play high. It's not hard. The only reason it's hard, well, there are some, okay, most people can just play high normally. Most of the time, it's something somebody told you along the way that messed you up, and now you're not playing high because something somebody told you put you in the wrong direction. Now, that doesn't mean that what that person told you was wrong. What it could mean is that you misunderstood what that person said. Okay? I'm not saying that your teacher was wrong. I'm saying someone said something somewhere in your career that you took the wrong way, or led you in the wrong direction, whether they led you that way on purpose or not. And now where your head is right now is in the wrong spot, and you can't make it work for you. But most of what it takes to play high is mental, not physical. Okay? So no, I would not normally recommend trying to get in your warm up at least as high as what you have to play in your performance. That's not that's that's a dumb way to approach it, in my opinion. Okay. All right. Well, I have to get this room cleaned up a little bit more for my first student today. All right. Thank you guys for hanging out this long. This is not the most coherent I've been. I'm still just a little bit groggy from the trip. 2 days of driving, right? We stopped in El Paso yesterday and then drove the rest of the way. And San Antonio had a lot of traffic, and so did Houston. So we got in much later than I had hoped. Anyway, we'll see you guys next time. Thank you for hanging out, and God bless you. Bye.